is Mr. Akin Oyebode. He is an economist passionate about sustainable development, finance, investment, and youth employment. He began his career as a research assistant at the Lagos Business School and spent over a decade in various banking roles with First City Monument Bank and Stanbic IBTC Bank. He was also the pioneer executive secretary of the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, LSETF, where he led the development of programs that provided loans of over 6 billion naira to 10,000 beneficiaries, employability training for 5,000 unemployed Lagosians, with job placement to almost 2,000 people. Akin voluntarily left his role at LSETF and was subsequently appointed as special advisor to the governor of Ekiti on investment, trade, and innovations. He is currently a two-term honorable commissioner for finance in Ekiti State and the chairman of the Forum of State Commissioners for Finance of Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we welcome the Honorable Commissioner, Mr. Akin, to the Platform Africa.
Good morning, everyone. So when Pastor Poju asked me for the title of my speech today, it took me a few minutes to decide on the title. I chose to borrow the title of Clay Christensen's book because, in my opinion, it was one of the big drivers of my shift from the private sector into public service. For those of you who don't know him, Professor Christensen, who died in 2020, was best known for his work on innovation and disruption. His maybe most famous book was Innovator's Dilemma, published in 1997. And it introduced a very interesting concept in strategy called disruptive innovation. And if you go to business school today, I'm guaranteed that you're going to be asked to read that book. Certainly, like your strategy classes, it's like a must read. But that's not the one that changed my life. The one that changed my life was titled, How Will You Measure Your Life? And it's a very important book because he wrote on things that you often don't hear people like him write about. Happiness, family, life, purpose, sickness. And when I read that book, it talks about very successful people who've gone to Ivy League schools, educated in the best universities in the world. And they have such divergent trajectories in life. Some commit suicide, some overdose, some just wilt under the pressure of how much promise their lives had. But then some end up being super successful people, and some just have great lives. They have nice families, they love their wives, they love their children, and they have the happily ever after story. But for me to help explain my choices, and I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for anyone else. It's important to understand a bit of who I am and my childhood. I was very lucky to be born to two public servants. So you might say, from right when I was born, a career in public service was inevitable. When I was growing up, I didn't think I had a privileged life. I lived on a university campus. I never had to think about where water was coming out of. I didn't know how to turn on a generator. But yet I thought I lived a very modest life. I didn't know I was living probably the best of Nigeria at the time, right? But why did I think it was a modest life? My parents drove one car each. My father only always said to me, remember the son of whom thou art. As you know, with teachers, with professors, pretty stingy with his money. I know he's watching. But it's one time to remind him that he was, pretty stingy. And every time he wanted to hand me pocket money on a Monday morning, he used that thing to give me a sermon about all the things I had done wrong the previous week. But it's very interesting because my father had 2 tours of duty in Ekiti State. First as Dean of Law at the then Ondo State University, and later as Vice Chancellor at the University of Ado-Ekiti. And in both instances, I was a very reluctant traveler to Ekiti. I was always angry when I had to go there. Because at Christmas, my friends were tossing banga across the streets in Lagos, and I had to spend it with my parents, my grandparents, very cold, Harmattan, fueled Ado-Ekiti, sometimes in my hometown in Ikoli. And so it was very funny that I didn't realize that the joke was on me. But God has a good sense of humor. And it's no wonder he says, preparation belongs to man, but the answer comes from him. Because in 2015, I had what I considered a great career. I was running the SME banking business of 𝐓𝐴𝐵𝐾 IBTC. That business was 35% of the Africa business of 𝐓𝐴𝐵𝐾 IBTC, of Standard Bank, sorry. So I was asked to come and become the Africa head of SME banking at Standard Bank, which was the job I always wanted. So I was excited, waiting for my work permit, finally go live in Santin. I had found an apartment, really nice apartment, heated pool, I was thinking about playing golf, every week. Supposed to be like what I'd been asking for. But before that, I'd also made a very bad decision. I decided to become a more active politician. And so in 2015, for those of you who might remember, I did the stupid thing of going on a debate, to participate and ask young people to support my party and the candidate at the time for the president of Nigeria. And I was still working at 𝐓𝐴𝐵𝐾 IBTC. So, but I'm not telling you to go and debate while you have a job. You might just lose your job. But in my case, the bank had the Standard Bank came out of post-apartheid South Africa. So there were very clear rules about political participation. You could be partisan, nobody could discriminate against you, etc., etc. So when I was asked that, young man, your picture is on our annual report. Did you think it was a good idea to go on national television to support a political party? I said, well, the rules of the bank, they are there for everyone to read. I haven't broken any rules. Thankfully, I come from a family of lawyers. So let's just say we left it at that. But because of that active participation, there were other things I had done. I had helped, the party with some policy work, under someone I was going to work for many years later. But I had also met this gentleman called Akin, who was trying to be governor of Lagos State. Now, we had a number of interesting conversations. But I didn't know I didn't think I was doing it for anything. I just thought it was part of my own participation to social impact. But Governor Oyebode ended up becoming governor, and a few friends and I sent him a deck and just said, look, you've been talking about this employment trust fund thing. This is how we think you should run it. And of course, he didn't reply my email. So I thought to myself, normal politician. He has gotten into office now. We are now no longer important to him. But I didn't care much. I had my job, so I was like, well, that's your loss. But then some random day, this man calls me. I was on the golf course. And they say, hold on for the governor of Lagos State. And I'm there thinking about putting. And next minute, the governor of Lagos State is saying, oh, you need to come and see me now. You know how these things, okay, you might not know how these things are. When the governor says, come and see me now, you don't tell him that I'm about to putt, I'm on the golf course. So, I hurriedly changed into I couldn't even go home to change. I wore track bottoms. I went there in sneakers. And the guys at Lagos House first looked at me and said, who is this clown? Who is this fellow? So I said, oh, my name is 𝐓𝐴𝐵𝐾 Oyebode. I'm here to see the governor. I said, you? Dressed like this? I said, well, he called me out of the golf course. But as you know, as they say, the rest is history. Governor Oyebode asked me to lead the Employment Trust Fund. I initially said no. He then half bullied me and said, this is the problem with you young people. You go on social media, and by the way, you can see my 2 sisters. You know which one uses technology better. One called it Twitter, the other called it X. And said to me, oh, you go on all the social media, you abuse politicians. Now we've given you the job, you don't want to do it. Well, I'll just appoint some old politician, and if they say the person didn't perform, I'll say, well, I gave the job to one of you, and he ran away. So, of course, I took that job. But from LSCTF, it was interesting that my next job was actually someone who had asked me to join him working for the policy council of our political party, the APC. And so in 2019, some guy called 𝐘𝐏 𝐏𝐿 had just won an election to become governor of Ekiti State. And in his first stint as governor, we had flirted with the conversation. I was like, nah, no way, don't even try it. We're not having this conversation. But in his second stint as governor, he called me and said, the first time, you didn't quite come. This one, you're coming by fire, by force. So he offered me a chance to serve our people, And this time, it was very easy. It was a no-brainer. I was much older. I had found what I thought was my purpose in life. And so I went off to Ekiti. But why did I go to Ekiti so easily? It's because when I was growing up, I didn't realize I lived a privileged life. The first time I realized my privilege was when I moved out of my parents' house in University of Lagos. And I moved to some place in Folagboro. And then they showed me what a changeover switch was. Till today, I do not lie. I do not know which one is NEPA, which one is generator. Because I learned it. It's like learning to ride a bicycle when you're 30. It's very difficult. That was when I realized that, oh wow, this is a life of privilege I've lived. But how did that privilege come? My father was born at a health center called 𝐨𝐿𝐼r in Ado-Ekiti. But he went to Christ School Ado-Ekiti. His father went to Christ School Ado-Ekiti. The only reason Christ School Ado-Ekiti exists today is because the missionaries came and set that school up. And from that school, my father got a scholarship, went to 𝐓𝐏𝐏𝐿, went to Harvard, went to Osgoode Hall, and provided, with my mother, the privilege that I enjoy till this day. That privilege was not accidental. It happened because some people went to where I am from to set up a school. And so, what would be my excuse? Chinua Achebe, reminds us that those whose sperm kernels were cracked by benevolent spirits should never forget to be humble. That was the reason that took me back home. It's very simple. It's very clear in my mind why I went back to Ekiti. My first or second day there, I must admit, I called my wife and said, babe, I think this is a bad decision. By 9 p.m., and those who know me know that I like to enjoy some of the nightlife. By 9 p.m., the whole place was dark. Admittedly, it was my first day, so maybe I didn't know where to go. But I was like, wow, 9 p.m.? I think I might have made a mistake. But every time I always thought I made a mistake, there was a gentleman in the government who was secretary to the government at the time, who constantly said to me, Akin, that you're even here is so much joy for me that I will do everything I can to ensure you don't go away. That was in 2019. There's a reason I'm saying that part, it will come back to us. But for me, public service is really a journey of self-discovery. There's a description of power that I like. It's when Robert Ingersoll was describing Abe Lincoln. He said, if you want to find out what a man is to the bottom, give him power. Because any man, or indeed any person, can stand adversity. But only a great man can stand prosperity. It is to the glory of Abe Lincoln that he never abused power, only on the side of mercy. It tells you that, you never know who you are until you handle power. And like Dr. Finney said, there's power and there's proximity to power. Even understanding the difference, some people till today do not understand the difference. They think they have power, they don't realize they're only close to the source of power until they are fired from their jobs. But I'll share with you a few things I think will be critical to anybody who's trying to shift from a career in the private sector into government. The first is always tenacity. And as I was preparing for this, I saw a tweet that hit the spot for me. And it said, as you become an adult, you realize that things around you just weren't always there. People made them happen. But only recently have I started to internalize how much tenacity is required in everything. That hotel park, that railway. The world is a museum of passion projects. When I joined Dr. Fayemi's government in 2019, we had a big dream to set up Ekiti Knowledge Zone. It's 2025. We haven't put a brick in the ground. But we haven't stopped working on that project for 6 years. It's one of the reasons I remain in that government till today. But in those 6 years, have we made progress? Yes. We've raised $80 million for the project, committed. Thank you. We have gotten a special economic zone license for the space. But why is it so important to me? It's not because of the shiny buildings that will come out of it, but it's the centers of excellence in our tertiary institutions. It's giving people in the tertiary institutions an opportunity to earn the skills that allow them compete with their peers across the world. It's in the funding for smart people who run businesses domiciled in Ekiti. It's in the hundreds of thousands of jobs, maybe even the millions of jobs that that zone will create. So when you guys come to EKZ in a few years, remember that the world is a museum of passionate projects. But apart from the tenacity that you require, because every day you go in, Tola talked about solving problems, people tweeting at you, that one is normal for me. I've been abused on Twitter for 10 years, so it's normal. I enjoy it. And sometimes I welcome it, because it's part of public service. You are serving the public. Criticism is a part of public service. It cannot define who you are. It can shape some of your decision making, because out of every 100 insults I get 5 wise ones, right? But you know how I do Twitter now? I don't even tweet much. I just read. I don't even have to respond. But if you complain about something and you see it got done after you complained, you know someone read it. You don't need to know I'm the one. I don't need to come back to you to say, hey, I did this stuff. No. But again, the thing is about tenacity. You've got to keep going. When you see an airport built, it's because someone kept going. The approval required to build an airport in Nigeria, I'm in the middle of it, so I know a lot about that one. Right? FAN, NAMA, NCAA, NIMET, I'm even talking you have the money committed. Right? It takes years. We finished building an airport in Ekiti. We want to get it certified for commercial travel. It's taking 4 months. It's not that it's been built, it's ready. So those are the things that you have to deal with day by day. It's stamina. You have to keep coming back every single day. Second thing is about being realistic. Again, I always like to recommend books. So Robert Caro, he's a 90-year-old biographer. Easily the best biographer in the world, in my opinion. He wrote a book about a man called Robert Moses. Does anyone know who Robert Moses is? I took a guess that maybe one person would, but nobody yet. Okay, Robert Moses is the guy who built pretty much all of the infrastructure you see in New York City today. He tried to run for governor once, he lost. But if you read that book on the life of Robert Moses, you see him grow from this starry-eyed Ivy Leaguer who came into government, and you see him change into this guy who became a power monger, right? He did a lot of good, but he did a lot of bad. And one of the things I've learned is that the work I do is not black or white, right? It's many shades of gray. And that I must be ready to break some eggs to make that omelet. What I don't want to do is set the kitchen on fire. But at the end of the day, when my tour of duty is done, the question for me is, will I be proud of all my decisions? No, I won't be. There are some that I have made I know. Personally, I'm not proud of them today. I won't lie to you about that. But were they necessary decisions for the time? They were, absolutely. Will I make them again faced with the same set of choices? Absolutely. Right? Do I go to bed thinking that was the best thing I could have done with the hand I was dealt? Absolutely. Right? But at the end of the day, no matter how powerful you become in public service, it's a waste of time if it does not serve any public good. Power for power in itself is an absolute vacuum. Because it's going to go, it's transient. They'll stop carrying your bags. The sirens will stop. The policemen will stop. So if you have siren today, better be ready to drive without it in a few years, because it's going to go away. I have seen people who walked in with a retinue of AIDS 5 years before. 5 years later in the same building, they were asked to fill a form to get into the same office. You know, it's the transient nature of life. You have to be at peace with it. What abides, what remains with you, is the legacy you leave behind. I think for me, another important factor is collaboration. And for those of you that watch football, and I can speak freely because Pastor Poju is not in the room, so I can speak freely. There's this small club, very small club. You know, when they play at home, they start their home games with a rendition from Carousel. It's a Roger and Hammersmith musical. I don't care about the club, useless club, right? But I like the motto of the club. You'll never walk alone. I haven't mentioned any football club. I don't know why you're laughing. But you know, as it is true with football, is it true with public service? Because when you're a public servant, you never ever walk alone. And I don't talk about the retinue of people who work with you, right? But it's understanding that your powers, even the president of Nigeria, as powerful as that office is, the president is absolutely powerless without people. Because if he says, go and arrest Akin from that podium, somebody has to effect that arrest. There's a chain of command that has to be efficient. During COVID, and I'm sure Dr. Finney remembers this, there were all sorts of barricades. Don't drive between 6 to 6. Don't shake this person. Don't have this party. Is the governor of Lagos State going to come to Ojota to say who's passing at 6 a.m.? He's trusting that the policeman there is not taking a bribe to let people pass. And that's the difference between what works and what doesn't, right? And that institution is built from top down. Because if you have people around you who are absolutely useless at what they do, no matter your best intentions, you'll be subpar. And that's one of the things I learned even at LSCTF. First was I had a governor that gave me a free run. Free run. You go to Governor Oyebode, you say, what are you coming to me for? I'm not going to send anybody to you. I'm not going to ask anybody to come to you for a favor. So if the person who hired me is not going to send anybody to me, then who the hell are you to send people to me? But also importantly was that I had a board who guided us with the best of intentions. And I had a team where everybody on that team was smarter than me. So they did all the work, I took all the credits. Fairly simple. But at Ekiti State as well, I've been incredibly lucky. I've worked with 2 governors. And people often ask, how have you been finance commissioner to 2 governors? But you know one thing about both those governors? They don't interfere in my work. They allow for a debate of ideas. They allow for disagreement. But I also have had permanent secretaries, staff, people who are willing to go the extra mile. So what you see is 1 or 2 people who you think are the superstars, but there's a whole team enabling that work. For me to speak here today, there's someone doing my work in Ekiti, even on Workers' Day. That should be a public holiday. And those people, without those people, you will fail as a public servant. But also patience. I always say nation building is an unending exercise. And if you think about the US, for example, you often hear them talk about things like towards a more perfect union. It teaches us about patience. If you think about Chief Obafemi Awolowo, it's been 70 years since he was Premier of the Western region. Many of those people who experienced him as Premier, I don't think they are still here with us. The only few of them are here with us, alive. But the legacy endures till tomorrow. But were those policies always popular? Absolutely not. Were taxes popular? No. The free education that we talk about today was funded by those taxes. I often talk about Prime Minister John Major. His decision to fund UK sports from the National Lottery and a performance-based approach. This was in the 90s. Nobody thought that it was a smart idea. Everybody complained about it. But in 1996, the United Kingdom won 1 gold medal in the Atlanta Olympics, 1, and 15 medals in total. 25 years later in Tokyo, Team Great Britain won over 100 gold medals alone. That was 25 years after. Prime Minister Major left office in 97. But the policy that he built in the mid-90s only delivered the outcomes 25 years later. And that's why I always think about, I like listening to podcasts, and one of my favorites is Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History. And the central theme of that podcast is that the past is often overlooked and misunderstood. And as one of my very good friends always says, you must remember that the past is an ongoing document. It will always be edited. And so you must do what you want to do today with the conviction that it is the right thing, but with the patience that it might not show while you're in office, but in the fullness of time it will endure. Another thing for me is about self-correction. And that for me is very simple. A public servant should never sacrifice public good at the altar of their ego. If I am wrong, I'm happy to eat humble pie. I went on Twitter, I said, I don't think Ekiti State deserves an airport. Fact. Did I say it? Absolutely. 10, 12 years later, did I eat my words? Absolutely. I have no pretense or apology to anyone about it. When I made my comments, the facts were clear. When I recanted it, the facts were not so clear to me. But I had two people, one the governor, one the secretary to the government, and both of them said to me, how dare you tell us this? We know this story more than you. We have more facts than you have. Right? Maybe it was 2 against 1, but I lost the debate, and today we have the airport. But for me, at the end of it is that it's not about my personal story. It's about what is beneficial to the people. So if the result of delivering something that will ultimately be valuable to the people is a few people on Twitter quoting my old tweet and reminding me and saying, this you? So be it. It's a small price to pay if I truly believe it is to the development of our people. But again, I'm very big about mentorship. And I'm always very big about name-checking my mentors. Professor Albert Allos gave me my first job at the Lagos Business School. Renowned professor, he would sit down with me at the time we were both smokers, sit down, smoke cigarettes, talk about, and please don't smoke cigarettes. I've long stopped. Talk about football. Made me feel at ease. Doing salami, who trained me, and had the generosity to say to me, Akin, I can't pay you what I think is value. Go and work for that bank. And Tolak Badamosi, who hired me as a young officer and said to me, the quality of your work, I don't need to hide you from the MD. Go and meet him on your own. I don't need to come with you. To Ladi Balogun, who was my first CEO, who himself had doubts. But when Ladi speaks with such confidence, you would never know that he had those doubts in himself as CEO. And to my 3 governors, Governors 𝐓𝐏𝐏𝐻𝐿, Fayemi, and Oyebode. Dr. Fayemi always tolerated my troublesome questions. And Governor Oyebode, who before he became my boss, was secretary to the government in Ekiti State. He was my therapist. Every time I wanted to leave, I would go to him and say, I'm done, I'm leaving. And he'll say to me, where are you going? First, it will take you 5 hours to even get to Lagos. So just relax, calm down. If every time you say you are leaving, you get on that road, do you know how many times you travel to Lagos? Just relax. And at the time he was my therapist, he never thought he was going to be my boss. But today, I have the honor and privilege of serving at his pleasure. And in all of this, I've learned the true value of having people speak for you. And, to be vessels for you. And so what I ask of you is that if you are ever in that position, you must remember to pay it forward. It's super, super important. I'll also talk very quickly about results. Because what we do as public servants, at the end of the day, it's results. It's a child being saved. It's someone having access to healthcare, right? It's someone having access to education. And so when I look at some of the work we do in Ekiti State, when I see the multidimensional poverty results being released, and we're a top 4 state in the country, one of the lowest multidimensional poverty numbers in Nigeria, I feel incredibly proud. It's work that's taken 2 governments to achieve. A few months ago, we had one of the highest food inflation numbers in Nigeria. But the governor of the state he doesn't even apologize. He fights me over how much we spend on agriculture. But one day he called me and said, come, next time I bring agric projects, tell me you won't fund it. See the inflation numbers a year ago, one of the highest in the country. See the numbers now, 17%, one of the lowest in the land. It's the money we put in agriculture that delivered those results. So I can't argue with results. if he brings it now, apart from being my boss, I fund agriculture. But in conclusion, I'd like to quote from one of my, if not my favorite speech of all time, Citizen in a Republic, that it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit only belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with the cold and timid souls, who neither know victory nor defeat. And with that, I will share my lasting message to the audience about Nigeria. And because of my good friend Tolu Ogunlesi, who says I must not leave here without quoting a Bible verse, I will draw my verse from Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3. For the vision is yet at an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. As I conclude my remarks, I must place my gratitude to the Covenant Christian Center, not just for inviting me to the platform, but for nurturing this idea from inception to what has now become a continental platform of ideas. I can only pray that what God has done with this event is only the beginning. And finally, I must thank the visionary, Pastor Poju Oyemade, for his contribution to nation building. While I don't always agree with his views, and I told him I don't agree with the one on the doctors, but that's a different discussion. I respect the conviction to speak on matters that many run from, and this courage to put ideas out in the public space, because it's this open exchange of ideas that shapes and develops society. I can only pray that God continues to bless him. And as a Manchester United fan, I grudgingly welcome him to the club of 20 league title winners, but I pray wholeheartedly that this may be the last title that Liverpool wins for the next 100 years. I thank you.
A round of applause again. Oh my goodness. We're going to wait for Pastor Poju's comeback. So I won't say anything. Thank you so much for that insightful session. It's been such a great time in here. Let me